Flyweights meet in the small cage of the UFC's Apex. Coming up this weekend, a couple of guys who like to motor mouth. We have Cody Durden take on InnerG, Charles Johnson. And Matt, it seems like a collision course that we finally have this fight. And for Charles Johnson, his third fight in 4 months, the guy doesn't stop.
Active.
So when you have a look at the matchup, Matt, I mean, for Cody Durden inside of the UFC's octagon, he's done more winning than he has done losing. And the 5-on-in, he lost to Jimmy Flick. So MMA math fans are going to say, well, he lost to Jimmy Flick by finish, and Charles Johnson finished Jimmy Flick. So, of course, Charles Johnson wins the fight. But Johnson's last time out against Ode Osborne, my good grief. He was on the back foot for a lot of it.
He was.
And listen, a lot of people that were out there on the Twitter sphere thought that Charles Johnson won the fight on MMA decisions. More thought that Osborne had won it than Johnson. But if you look at it, I mean, it's like that Chris Stapleton song. Nobody to blame but me. And Johnson had a lot of opportunities to capitalize in that fight and didn't necessarily do it. So when you look at a matchup like this, I mean, Cody Durden's one of those guys. And I'm going to bring in the prop now. I got a record. It's Jay Giles' band. It's the Love Stinks record. There's a song on this one. Third one on side one. Taking You Down. And I think they're talking about a different kind of taking you down. But I think Cody Durden out of American Top Team, not Atlanta anymore. ATT proper with a guy like Tony Gravely to train with, who used to train at ATT Atlanta. I think those boys are cooking up a takedown heavy game plan. I think that's going to be what Cody Durden's going to do.
He could strike with Charles Johnson. He could.
It'd be power versus volume.
Exactly. It would not favor Cody Durden in the slightest. Now, yes, he could land a big shot because he does have some decent looping shots when he is trying to close the distance, but he's not a guy like Marvin Vettori who's going to pump out the jab and really work combinations before the takedown. And Charles Johnson, here's the weird thing about Johnson. I feel like we only bring up the negatives in his game because the positives, they speak for themselves when you watch him fight, but it's always him kind of holding him back because the volume is absurd. He's able to land really clean shots. He has good boxing combinations. He can strike moving backwards, even though in the last fight didn't really work, but still, not a lot of guys can throw volume strikes on the back foot, but Charles Johnson has that X factor in his game.
Moves his head and his core while he's doing it.
Exactly.
With his feet.
He does have a high level boxing game, but the problem is, if he gets held up against the cage, it will eliminate a lot of that movement. It will prevent him from really being able to use that core movement as well, because you can't move backwards when there's a cage behind you, and it's going to help Cody Durden just center him a lot more and be able to cut the cage off, because if Durden is able to have success in this matchup, it's because of his cage cutting ability, and that will be at the forefront of his game in this, because if Johnson's able to just circle on the outside, pump the jab out, it's wild I'm going to say this, but he could Caitlin Chukagian himself to a win in this fight. He's going to be able to have those types of volume numbers by the time this fight is over. But Durden, I think, does have not just the wrestling X factor, but the ability to land power shots off the wrestling. So I'll be curious to see what Johnson does do if the takedowns are starting to get to him, if he's not able to use the movement as much as he's probably going to like.
And it was weird. Like, I listened to an interview that Charles Johnson just did with the All-Star MMA and JHK, and in that one, he said that he took the fight against Ode Osborne on 13 days notice, and then the quotable from the entire interview that I got, he said, and I quote, I did just get out of the Jimmy Flick fight. I feel good. My hand's still broken. Feel good. It's a boxer's fracture, and then he holds up his right hand. So I don't know if that's a recurring type of injury. We saw Kevin Holland break his right hand in 3 places.
Yeah.
And then when he fought Santiago Ponzinibbio, didn't throw his right hand until he threw a back fist and knocked out Ponzinibbio. So I don't know if Johnson carried that into the Osborne fight, and that's why he struggled. But by the jumpin' jeepers, Charles Johnson told a 10-minute story of how the Durden fight didn't come to be back in January. And then he spoke uninterrupted for 15 minutes. I've never seen an MMA fighter talk more than Charles Johnson. Credit to him. He weaved a good story. But I was captivated. But it lasted a really long time. But when you do consider it, he said coming into the Osborne fight, he had a sinus infection. He was dealing with the hand thing. He was dealing with the fact that it's a 30-hour trip from Thailand back over to Vegas. So all those things came into a bit of a perfect storm. Now, he did weigh 130 pounds last time out. You see that on the graphic, but it was a catchweight fight because of the short notice nature. So we'll see how Johnson makes out with this one. Training in the States for this one. I know Tiger Muay Thai is listed as his gym in certain spots. It's Murcielago MMA for this one. But when you look at it for Johnson, he did win a Tiger Muay Thai scholarship some years ago. So he's competed out of that gym in the past. He also had a 1-5-4 boxing record. which is at the forefront of his game. But when you consider it for Johnson, we talked about it with Hailey, Cowan, Brennan, the acrobatics and tumbling background. For Charles Johnson, track and field and steeplechase, and he was a 2-time champ over there doing those disciplines. So for Charles Johnson, cardio's a big thing. We've always called him a 5-round fighter. So we'll see how that plays out against Durden in the smaller cage, where Durden's a control, pressure-oriented wrestler, and he's been able to do that in a lot of his fights. And for both of these guys, I touched on it. Johnson beat Flick. Durden lost to Flick by finish. Johnson beat Moda over with, good old LFA, keeping that belt. Durden beat Moda's last time out, 30-27, 229-28, 12 minutes and 32 seconds of control time, and then Moda pissed as hot as you can piss for a banned substance.
Yeah.
2-year USADA suspension for meldonium, and I looked at meldonium. That's an Eastern European type of compound there. So Johnson in the matchup, Matt, more than a 2-1 favorite. We look at the Tapology vote. Surprised us there to you. I think they're going to be closer. I'm going to say over under 67.5% Johnson.
I think they'll be under.
You think they're going to be under?
No.
They're over. So 545 total votes. 72% Johnson, 81% by decision. For the 28% that have Durden, 82% by decision. So who do you have here?
If Durden wins, I think it will be one-way traffic. Like, I could see another fight where he gets 10, 11, 12 minutes of control time, looks really dominant with his wrestling, and if he is going to win this fight, that's probably how he's going to do it. But I do have Charles Johnson. I know there's a lot of negatives in his game, but I still like him with the volume, and I do think this fight's probably going to go to decision. I don't really think either guy has enough power edge over the other to really be able to get a finish on the feet. I think Johnson just is the much more complete guy on the feet, though, and for those reasons, I have Charles Johnson.
I don't like Durden in the third round at all.
No.
I mean, if you go back and watch his fight against Arichi Long, like, he got pounded off on a nearly finish at the end of that one. He really kind of blows that load early, and he comes hot. He comes hot in these fights.
Where is your mind during these videos?
When you look at a guy like Charles Johnson, he really comes on stronger as the fights go on. You got to keep it clean. And when you look at a guy like Johnson, he's able to keep that motor going as these fights go late. But the thing that I struggle with for Johnson is the last 3 fights have been in the UFC's Apex. He fought Jalga Shumagulov. He then fights Jimmy Flick. He then, his last time out, fights Ode Osborne. I thought he lost to Shumagulov. He finished Flick. And then he was the losing end of the fight against Ode Osborne. I think Cody Durden's going to have so much success with his wrestling in this fight. Charles Johnson thrives out of the wrestling scrambles, but he also tends to get held down. He struggled with wrestling defense when he was on the LFA scene. He struggled with it in the UFC, and I know that's been against Makayev, and he struggled up against the cage against a guy like Jalga Shumagulov. I think Durden, his wrestling's better than Shumagulov. His striking's not, but I think that Durden's going to be able to capitalize on that. For that reason, I'm actually going with a pretty big underdog in Durden.
I think you answered your own question, though. I agree with everything you said, but since his cardio's so poor, I don't think that's a sustainable game plan for all 50 minutes. I agree with every single point you just brought up. But if he's having that much success with his wrestling, Charles Johnson doesn't just lay there like a whale on the beach. He's going to try to get back up to his feet. And I do favor him that much more with the cardio. So I agree with all those points you brought up. I just think if he's having that much success, it's just going to drain his gas tank that much faster.
Matt, we're splitting the pick. You've got InnerG, Charles Johnson. I'm going with the ATL's own. We're talking about Cody Durden. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have on the matchup main event. Yadong, Ricky Simone. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.